Okay, the recording should be running now, so how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it is 7 p.m. here in Cleveland,
Right, yeah.
Ohio,
Yep.
and it's morning for you, I guess.
Yep. Bright and early, 9
Uh,
a.m., second cup of coffee, I'm pretty much awake.
okay, I made a late night cup of coffee just for an exception for this.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're from Canada, right?
That's right.
Which province?
Alberta.
Alberta. Okay, never been there.
You should go sometime, if only to see the Rockies.
That would be cool. I always end up heading south, or in west when I never feel the urge to go north. I guess it's already cold enough here.
Understandable.
Yeah. So we're recording this for WCSB Cleveland, a radio station, and the show is called Heartbeat in the Brain. I don't normally do sort of political interviews. Occasionally I do, but
Yeah.
the last time I did, I got in trouble during COVID, so I was
Oh,
sort of forbidden from taking phone calls for a year and a half. But
Oh, my God.
because I dared to talk about the new COVID rules at all the venues in town that we give away tickets for, and I'd been giving
Yeah.
away tickets for them for 15 years, and suddenly you needed to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test to go, and I just thought that people ought to have a dialogue about that. It just changed so
Yeah.
suddenly. But that got me that caused a big stink in the community. I was attacking all the venues according to my peers and
yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah, I get it.
yeah.
So how long are you looking to talk?
And not till 8 o'clock, I guess, in an hour.
Okay.
55 minutes
All right.
around
Sounds good
that
to me.
amount of time.
Sure.
Cool. And so most of my audience would not be familiar with you because this is
Yeah.
primarily a music show. And
Yep.
maybe you could just give a
Well, I
brief
have a
introduction
band.
to. Oh yeah, what's your band called?
It's called Kodomo-san.
Kodomo-san.
Which-
Do you sing in the band or?
I sing and play guitar and play bass as needed.
Wow. So how many people are in the band?
It's a foursome.
Are you the only non-Japanese in the band?
Oh no! It's all it's all foreigner expats. Here.
Okay. Okay.
2 Canadians, an American, and a Brit.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But you do speak Japanese, right?
Yeah, I get by. Yeah.
Cool. You've been in Japan like 15
20
years? or something
years,
like that?
if you can believe it.
20 years. Wow. You like it there?
It's definitely my home now. Yeah. It's not
Right.
for everyone, but I feel at home here.
Yeah, I visited in 2019, going into 2020 for the new year. Yeah, for like 3 weeks.
You
It was
just made it.
Just made it. Yeah, exactly. That was the last big travel for a while. It was interesting because that kind of got me accustomed to seeing people in masks because you don't really before
Yeah.
COVID you
That's
didn't
the
really
thing,
see that
yeah.
around
Because
here.
from my perspective, I remember I didn't really understand the significance of what was happening in February 2020 until I went to the airport because I was going to Mexico at that time, and I saw foreigners wearing masks. That's when I
Right.
knew, oh, something's happening here. Because Japanese people wearing masks, no big deal. But when foreigners are wearing
Right.
masks, you know something's happening.
Yeah, it's very strange. I guess it's never going back. But so 20 years in Japan, and I guess as bad as COVID was, it did introduce me to you. It probably increased your viewership by it probably doubled the amount of people who tune into
Until
you.
I got
I'd
scrubbed from
imagine.
YouTube anyway. Yeah.
Right, but but your videos were going around. I remember being laid off in March, April 2020. A video of you walking around Japan, like with the selfie stick. I don't remember what it's called, like the one thing no one's talking about, COVID or something like that. But that was my introduction, and then slowly more of your stuff kept popping up, and the Bill Gates documentaries came out. Those were really great, and pretty soon I got kind of plugged in to be a weekly. New World next week every week. Look forward to the Thursday nights.
Nice.
So and then eventually became a subscriber after watching your pretty amazing documentaries.
Thank you for that. I couldn't do it without help of people like you, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, eventually it just sinks in. Like, oh, this guy's. I'm like on his website all the time. I should should pitch in. So, how long ago were you able to move full time into being self-employed as a researcher?
So I started the website in 2007, and at the time I was still doing English teaching full time. But
Okay.
in 2011, I made the plunge and decided to go full time with this, and just was kind of scraping by, just enough to get by. And thankfully now I have enough subscribers that I can do it comfortably, but it was a bit touch and go for a while there.
Yeah, well, it requires a lot of stamina to keep going all these years, doing this stuff, and to not get this overwhelmingly depressed with the amount of news stories you cover. All these terrible things.
Well, it's why I do Solutions Watch.
Right. Yeah, that is nice. So I guess to introduce you to the audience, you're I guess I would describe you as a journalist, but not the kind that would fly to a war zone or something like that. More of a researcher journalist who creates good summations, summaries, and documentaries about certain topics.
Well, that's a pretty good description, but I have struggled for many years. Yeah, how do I describe what I do? Because you're right. I mean, I don't put myself in the ranks of the gumshoe investigative reporters that are out there on the trail digging up skeletons in people's closets. I've been more of a researcher insofar as I'm generally looking at stuff that's already out there, right? And I'm just putting it together and hopefully putting it in a way that people will start to connect dots and understand it. So I've been struggling to I'm I don't know, journalist, researcher, what did I say? But actually recently I've decided I'm an educator. I think fundamentally what I'm doing is almost it's almost like I'm teaching a class or something. And here's what I've discovered. And in that framework, I can sort of understand the work that I'm doing a little bit better. And it makes it puts it in perspective for me, because I think some of the people approach my work like it is entertainment, like it is just another whatever TikTok kind of video or something. But no, this is more like a class that I'm trying to educate people on a certain subject. And I get not everyone wants to be sitting in class listening to a professor give a lecture. That's fine. It's just that's the way that I think I'm operating. So I think that's probably the way I frame it.
And you have made some videos, like the Media Monarchy videos are sort of or not Media Monarchy, the Media Matrix videos are like kind of classroom style. And so you've done some. Right.
Yeah. In fact, I have a website now called opensourceeducation.online, which I appear on this radio show called Declare Your Independence every other week. And the host of that show was the one who really put that together and started the ball rolling on that, because he was the one talking about, he wanted Corbett in the classroom, because I guess in the States you guys have Stossel in the classroom or had that at some point.
Yeah. So, I was homeschooled. I don't know.
What's his name? Something Stossel. Anyway, he was a big name ABC reporter, and he did sort of like a news package update thing, but from a libertarian perspective. But this Ernest Hancock that I've talked to, he was like, no, we need to get Corbett in the classroom. The kids need to be seeing this kind of information. So he was the one who spurred me to create this website, opensourceeducation.online. And if you go there, it's kind of some of my most important works, my Federal Reserve documentary and things like that, but packaged in a way that this is like a class, and here's a curriculum, here's economics, here's history, here's science, here's philosophy. And when you approach it from that perspective, I think my work makes more sense.
Okay, I will have to check that out. I hadn't even heard you mention that website before.
I don't mention it enough.
Okay. Cool. But you've also, I would say you're also a documentarian, or if that's the right word. You've put out several feature documentaries that I think are very, very well put together.
Thank you.
My favorite are...
people have a hard time finding it for some reason, even though they're all at the bottom of my homepage. So if you, for whatever reason, can't scroll to the bottom of my homepage, you can go to corbettreport.com/documentaries, and there's all of my major feature-length documentaries.
You've put out probably 10 or so by now, huh?
Something like that, yeah. It really depends on which ones I count as documentaries and which ones are just big podcast episodes. But for example, I had a podcast episode a few years ago on hopium, a brief history of hopium. And a lot of people still go back to that and cite it, and I think they might think of it as a documentary, but it was really just a podcast episode. So I don't know. It's semantics at some point.
Right. Yeah, your website is just a vast. There's a search bar function, and you can find everything. You've even covered like the Ohio bridge bombers. You know, those guys who got
Oh,
set up
right.
by the
Yes.
FBI.
Yep.
I knew those guys. I used to wait. They always came into the coffee shop I worked at and asked for free
Wow.
coffee. So,
Wow. Yeah.
so, but yeah, some easily hoodwinked young radicals out there.
Which is a consistent story when it comes to those types of stories for some reason.
Right, the
People who can barely
stories.
tie their shoelaces tend to somehow end up in these elaborate plots that were funded and helped along by FBI informants. It's an interesting narrative.
It is still ongoing, I guess. The recent governor of Michigan story and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On the same line. So what brought you into this realm, I guess? Like, what was it for you? 9/11, that made you like kind of, I don't know what the word is, conspiracy reality. What was the...
Yeah, I could go back. I could go way back in my biography because I remember when I was growing up as a kid, it must have been, I guess it was probably the 25th anniversary of JFK assassination. And there was some stuff around that. And they had, I seem to recall watching like a PBS documentary with my dad at some point when I was a kid and about the JFK assassination. And, at the time I thought, well, yeah, of course it wasn't Oswald acting alone, but I didn't really, it wasn't my identity. I didn't think about it too much. It wasn't something that consumed me. But yeah, so ultimately, I think the thing that was the penny drop moment that really got the ball rolling for me was the discovery of, oh, hey, we were absolutely lied to about 9/11. And once I discovered that and started in, more importantly than just passively consuming that information, the part at which I started researching that information for myself and trying to dig things up and finding, oh yeah, there was this 2001 Le Monde article in France about Osama bin Laden meeting CIA agents in his hospital in Dubai in 2000. Things like this. And I could go and actually look up the article for myself. I didn't have to read about it. I didn't have to take anyone's word for it. It was the point at which I started engaging in the research is the point at which it really started to click together for me. Because it's one thing to sort of passively consume information. It's another thing to be actively constructing a worldview based on information you can find for yourself.
Right, and then a whole nother thing to actively be putting it out there into like a cohesive narrative or, article or whatever.
And it's something that I stress from time to time. People sometimes ask me, why do you do it? Well, there are a lot of reasons why I do what I do, but I guess one of them, the most selfish reason, it kind of helps me. If I was just sort of looking at this information or researching this information, that's one thing. But to actually have to try to put it together and articulate it and put it into some sort of podcast or video that will hopefully teach other people about it, it means I have to really understand what it is I'm saying and what it is I think and really put things together. So it kind of helps me to put this information together into podcast form. And, I hope it helps other people too.
Yeah, that's great. It's great work. And you can see, going back in your archives, how you've, I guess at a certain point you met this guy, Brock, who did the video editing for you, and it raised you up a whole nother level as far as your format.
Yeah, that was an interesting story, actually, because Brock happened to know some people in my area of Japan, which is a total urban, rural area that no one even knows. Even Japanese people don't know this area of Japan. So it was really strange that he happened to know some people, and so he was visiting them. So we met up when he was, hey, I'm passing through town. I listened to your show. Can we meet up? So I met up with him, and that happened a couple of years in a row. And then at some point, the idea came up that I needed help with the video editing because I was doing all the video editing for the site myself at that time, and it was a lot of work. So he said, well, I don't really know video editing, but I'd be happy to learn. And so I thought, well, let's give it a try. And yeah, lo and behold, now he's been my video editor for 10 years. I couldn't accomplish 1/10 of what I do without him and his support. So it was really an amazing, fortunate coincidence that we met.
Right, I figured he was already a video editor, and then he just kind of like he was such a fan that he hopped on board. But that's interesting.
But I think that speaks to it because I'm not a reporter. I'm not a video editor. I'm not a podcaster. I just started doing this and sort of learned along the way. So I know it's possible to do that, and that's exactly what happened with Brock.
Right, I guess that's how anybody learns anything, out of necessity.
Yeah,
or the best way to learn it.
Yeah.
So this is being broadcast. We're recording this on Monday night, but this will be broadcast Tuesday when everyone's kind of tuned in to the election, or as you call it, the selection. And I guess not being a native person from the USA, it's pretty easy for you to be distanced from all this. But people here really, it's really still maybe a little less because this particular election is just so ridiculous. I think more people, and because of the genocide in Palestine, I think more people are kind of seeing through it or not as invested, maybe. But still, it's a big deal, and everyone's kind of going to be tuned in like while we're doing this, while the show is airing. Kind of. What do you have to say about the? Does it matter at all? What do you think?
Well, let me preface all of this by reiterating, I'm a Canadian in Japan and an anarchist to boot. So if none of that appeals to you or you don't care about my opinion based on that, that's fine. I don't mind. But having said that, I do have some thoughts about this. As you say, I don't call it an election. I call it a selection, and I say that every single time because I think it applies on multiple levels. One of which is that you are not electing anyone. You are selecting out of two pre-selected candidates, essentially. I mean, I know there are other names on the ballot, but we all know it's down between two people who have gone through the political process with their parties and have been selected for that position. But even beyond that, I mean, I think Americans probably by this point now know more than ever that their votes are not equally all counted and all have, a real meaning. Let's put it that way. So at any rate, as I say, I don't believe in the political process. I don't believe in the democratic ideal as an ideal, which is, I know, sacrilege to some Americans. But I genuinely think that the whole process is essentially a legitimation of a ruling oligarchy. And it's just a way of putting your imprimatur, your stamp of approval on the whole process. No matter what happens, is whoever gets 50% plus one of this vote can rule over the country, which I think is really signing away your individual freedom, which, as far as I know, was what the founding fathers of the United States were supposedly all about, right? Right. But having said that, I do think so. I tend to say that there's no difference and it doesn't matter, and whoever wins, the oligarchy and the technocrats win, because you can look at, for example, I mean, just take one avenue of political analysis here. Let's just look at the big tech oligarchs who are increasingly running our lives as we move into the digital age. And whether it is, whether you're looking at Eric Schmidt or Bill Gates, for example, on one side supporting Harris, or you look at Elon Musk and Peter Thiel on the other side supporting Trump. Again, either way, Silicon Valley wins, and it's mostly the same PayPal mafia that tends to win in these types of selections. Or, as you say, for example, what's going on in Israel with Palestine? Yeah, who's the candidate who's opposing that? Oh, right, there is none, etc., etc. There's many ways we could look at it. But one thing that I think is important is, as you point out, so many Americans not only care, but passionately care, have invested their identity in this selection process, that their entire world is about who wins this selection. And because of that gives a sort of reality to what's going on right now, as obviously the cultural divide in America, the wedge is driven further and further. And it's now not Americans, it's Democrats and Republicans, essentially. And which side are you? Which is the beginning of a sort of long cultural civil war that's been brewing for decades, and which is looking like it will come to a head at some point in the near future. That might be the real importance of this election, more so than any actual political policy change that might come out of as a result of this.
Right. And what do you say to the people who say, well, okay, voting for the president, it's a legitimization of their process, but what about the local issues and other issues on the ballot and things like that? Do you think it counts for anything, or do you think it's just a waste?
Right. Well, okay, I understand that, and I'm very much more sympathetic to that view. At the very least, keep politics local, and things that are actually in your area that you actually have some degree of real influence and sway over. But having said that, again, I do say I am an anarchist, and I don't say that lightly, insofar as I think that the use of political quote-unquote authority to impose your will on other people because you happen to have 50% plus one of whatever magical incantation ritual you're putting in the slave suggestion box does not legitimize the use of political force against other peaceful people who do not want to go along with what you're doing. So I don't think that there's no good taxation. There's no good government program that is enforced at the implied or the actual barrel of a gun to force peaceful people to do things that they don't want to do. I think that in and of itself is morally wrong. So no, I don't actually advocate any sort of voting process. But at the very least, as I say, I understand the principle of acting locally because that truly matters and you truly have a say in what's going on in your local area. It's the principle of subsidiarity, i.e., power should operate at the lowest possible level that it can, for example, in your local area, rather than having this federal government infrastructure of millions of federal workers and these big agencies and programs. No, let's keep power as local as possible. It's just I would prefer if it was done in communities of interest that was based on the principle of voluntary participation. You can choose to support this or that, whatever government or program or whatever it is that you want to support, but you are not, threatened with being put in a cage if you don't go along with that.
Sure, and I'm seeing it's the first time I've noticed it in this election. This big kind of shaming tactic that we don't know who you voted for, but it's a public record whether you or not you voted. And my girlfriend's been getting these kind of letters in the mail saying that, and it's kind of like everywhere. This election is like, we know if you don't vote, your neighbors are going to know. This kind of good citizen shaming sort of idea, which is
You know what? There's a funny story with that because I just recently did a presentation for a conference that was just held in Sedona on Liberty on the Rocks, which was talking about this idea of voluntarism and not voting for a political savior, but actually making a difference in the real world, etc. And my talk was on an announcement from the Ministry of Toothbrushes, because I know the statist indoctrination is so deep that people cannot possibly imagine how we could have things in our life without the government there to make them possible. And I was pointing out, you might think it's ridiculous to have a Ministry of Toothbrushes that's in charge of toothbrush production. And how would we, without government, who would make the toothbrushes? But as I point out, actually in real life, there have been situations where that has really happened, like in the Soviet Union, where they literally had these ministers and agencies in charge of the production of toothbrushes and women's pantyhose and anything else you can think of. There were actually government ministers that had to sit there and go through data and decide how much of each product should be produced each year and what style and what size and what color and etc. And they had to centrally control all of that manufacturing. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's ridiculous, but it really has happened throughout history. Anyway, that's just one example of how we don't have to rely on the government for everything, and we wouldn't expect them to. But in the course of that, just as a part of that sort of, it's a joke, it's kind of a funny thing. So me and Brock, the video editor, we were putting together this music video for Everybody Wants to Rule the World, the national anthem of this imaginary country that I was making fun of in my video.
Good choice,
and in the course of that, we were looking for different clips that would be funny to put over that. And one that stuck out was, I can't remember, I think it was 2008 or maybe 2016. Anyway, there was some U.S. election where Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, came out of the voting booth, and he's wearing the "Vote or Die" shirt, which is particularly resonant given the recent information about Diddy, isn't it? And so I just thought that speaks volumes in and of itself. But yeah, that idea, vote or die. We don't know who you voted for, but we can tell whether you voted. .. is
the voter you're worthless as a human. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, just keep in mind, if you're in that mentality, you're basically in the ranks of P. Diddy and people like that.
Right. Well, my very first election as an 18-year-old, 2004, I voted for a member of Skull and Bones Secret Society. I didn't realize it at the time, but I found that out a few years later, and that kind of included
the funny thing is,
me in.
Whichever side you voted for Skull and Bones, right?
Exactly. I'm not going to tell. Yeah, that does not tell you who I voted for, but I did vote for a member of Skull and Bones in the 2004 election, and fool me once, shame on you. So I did get fooled that time, but I learned that was enough for me. Like once I learned that both candidates were a member of the same secret society that only allows 15 members. That clued me in that this might not be an actual democratic process here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And
but,
you know what? Again, we could look at different examples of that. One that I was just thinking of when I'm talking about Eric Schmidt backing Harris and Peter Thiel backing Trump. Well, they're both members of Bilderberg. In fact, aren't they both on the Bilderberg steering committee? And if people don't know what Bilderberg is, well, that again speaks volumes to the way that power really operates in our society, that has nothing to do with the political process that's dangled in front of the public, but in these secret closed-door meetings that take place off the record and out of sight and that the media never talks about, that it's really where the governing power of international finance and government really operate.
Right. And Peter Thiel, yeah, is a relevant figure. I remember hearing about him because I was supportive of Ron Paul in 2008. And I remember hearing he was like the billionaire backing Ron Paul or something like that. So he came across as like some sort of libertarian, at least then. But now you see him behind this kind of, what is it called?
I'm writing
Palantir software.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm writing an article series on Peter Thiel right now. The third part is going to drop this coming weekend, so people can stay tuned for that. But yes, I've been examining Peter Thiel's biography and who he is and where he comes from. And you're exactly right. He's framed himself. He has called himself and identified as a libertarian. So everyone will just unquestioningly parrot that. Oh, he's a libertarian. But what does that really mean? He did back Ron Paul in the 2012 selection process, but did he really? I mean, he started a super PAC, Endorse Liberty, I think it was called, in which he pumped millions of dollars in that was ostensibly supporting the Ron Paul campaign at the time. But even Ron Paul's campaign manager said, we have no idea like anything with regards to Peter Thiel or how he's supporting us. We read about it in the press like everyone else. We didn't know that this was even happening. And we can't find any way in which any of the money that he's spent has actually benefited our campaign. So, and in fact, even at the speeches that he was giving at the time, Thiel didn't even mention Ron Paul. And when he was asked about him, he's like, well, actually, I don't think that the vote itself is that important, but blah, blah, blah. So it was more of a political maneuver. But in that, he said at the time he was positioning himself for 2016 and what comes next. And of course, that's when he jumped on the Trump train. And then after that, he started supporting non-politicians as upstart political candidates like J.D. Vance, who he bankrolled $15 million for his Senate campaign so that he got in as senator. And now, because Peter Thiel enacted the rapprochement between Vance and Trump, because Vance had said some bad things about Trump in the past, but he was the one who brought them together at Mar-a-Lago in 2021 to patch things over. And then, of course, now we see Vance as the potential vice president. So there you go.
Right. So if we see another Trump presidency, we can expect to see a lot more of Peter Thiel, I guess.
Yes. In fact, he was even an important figure behind the scenes in the 2016 transition. People may or may not know he had an office in Trump Tower. He was part of the transition team picking people to staff the Trump administration. He managed to get some quote-unquote ex-Palantir advisors in key positions, for example, in the Pentagon. And then, wouldn't you know it, not only does Palantir win a lawsuit against the U.S. Army to force the U.S. Army to open up bidding on certain contracts, but then Palantir goes on to win that contract with the U.S. Army to the tune of $800 million, the largest single contract in Palantir history. What's Palantir, people may ask, and if they do, it's because they don't keep up with the latest surveillance, spying, AI, software, technocratic nightmare nonsense from the bowels of the Pentagon. But long story short, yeah, Palantir is software that Thiel really started the fostering the development of in PayPal when he was back when he was PayPal CEO. They moved it over into a private company, which they then started to get CIA and other intelligence agencies on board to basically scarf up and data mine and visually represent the various data that they have on everyone on the planet, including, of course, U.S. citizens. Fourth Amendment be damned. So that's where Peter Thiel makes his billions, and then he uses that to buy politicians for millions. Right.
That reminded me of a documentary you just shared, or like an old one about this I don't remember what it was called, the digital simulation in out of Purdue in Indiana. There's like a digital version of each and every one of us out there,
The
like
sentient
in a sort of
world
Matrix.
simulation. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
People need to
that's
look into that story because, yeah, as I was reporting, I reported on that back in 2012. And even at that time, all of the information about this program was from 2007, 2008, and then the trail goes completely dead. It's just, you never hear about it again. But yeah, at that time, in the early 2000s, they had this vast simulation, computer simulation that was literally, that they said that they were trying to create a digital avatar of every single person on the planet so that they could simulate, what would happen in this event or that event so that they could essentially predict the future. And they're talking about this and how the Pentagon is interested in and developing it and using it. And then it just goes, the trail goes dead and you never hear about it again. But I'm sure in the, nearly 20 years since they were reporting on that, nothing came of it. Nothing's happened. Don't worry, guys. Just go back to sleep.
wow. Yeah, there's some crazy things there on your website. I mean, but real. I mean, very much. That's what separates you from a lot of other people. You don't do a lot of speculation. It's hard hitting journalism, really.
Let's put it this way: the tagline of the Corbett Report from its very beginning was "Open Source Intelligence News," and that wasn't an accident. I wanted this to be an open source project that you don't have to believe my interpretation on anything. You don't have to take my word for it. There's no trust me, bro. I've got a super secret source that I can't tell you about. To the extent that it is possible, I document what I'm saying. Here's where I get this. Here's the document. I will link you directly to it. And I note that back when I started in the early 2000s, it was weird. It was unusual to see a New York Times or a Washington Post or whatever have any sort of hyperlink to anything in any of their stories. They wouldn't. They would say, oh, there was this government report that says this, but they wouldn't link you to the report. But hey, hey guys, it's the 21st century. How about providing a link to your source? Why not? Why not let people read it for themselves? So that's been an important part of what I do. I don't want people to take my word for it. I don't want people to believe me. I want people to check sources because I think it is important for people to come to their own understanding. And as I say, for me, the real penny drop moment wasn't when I just started passively coming into contact with information that challenged my worldview. It was when I started looking and researching and digging for myself. And I think until people start to get their hands dirty and actually start looking at this information and digging it up and trying to verify it, I don't think they'll really understand, just how bad things are, which is an important part of hopefully making them better.
Right. I mean, it's good that, like you highlighted before, you do the solutions watch, so it's not all just depressing news stories on your website. There's like active, videos of local farms, city farming, and stuff like that. Different ways people can resist or do their own thing.
That's right. In fact, in 2000, I think 17 or 18, I started a program called Propaganda Watch because I saw this ridiculous piece of propaganda. Essentially, it was an ad, quote unquote, for a car company, but it was essentially propaganda for the driverless future and how wonderful it will be when you can your car will just drive you to where you want to go. Who needs control? Who needs a steering wheel, right? And it was just over the top propaganda. And so I wanted to make a video about it. But I thought, you know what? I think that I will be able to every single week dig up some ridiculous piece of propaganda going through the news wires and talk about it and hopefully educate people about what is this propaganda and how is it functioning and how can we better arm ourselves against it. And at the time, it was a gamble. I really didn't know. Will I be able to talk about propaganda every single week in and week out? And lo and behold, once I started putting my mindset in that context, suddenly I was like, oh yeah, I could talk about this every single week forever, and I would never.
Yeah, every single day, really. You wouldn't run out of a new story. It's omnipresent now. Yeah.
But in 2020, 21, I noticed. Okay, so I thought, so when I'm looking for propaganda, suddenly I see it everywhere, right? I wonder, can I do the same? Because, okay, great. I get it. There's propaganda everywhere. They're trying to manipulate you. They're trying to lie to you. But I'm much, much more interested in what can we do to construct the world we want. That should be where we are putting our time, our focus, our attention, our energy. So I thought, hey, I've started Propaganda Watch on a whim. I'm going to start Solutions Watch because I want to see solutions. I want to promote people who are doing things in the real world that will hopefully make a better world. And just as with Propaganda Watch, I don't know if I can do this every week, week in and week out, talking about solutions. Will I be able to do it? Well, I put it out there. Oh, okay, let's start it. Let's try. And so for the last 3 years, I've been doing this Solutions Watch series, week in, week out, looking at different ways that people can do things to hopefully change their life for the better and thus make the world a better place, hopefully. And so far, it's definitely worked. So I think that speaks to the power of where we put our time, our attention. Once you start to notice, once you start to put yourself in the mindset of not looking for problems and looking for, no, let's start looking for solutions. You will start to see them everywhere you turn. And that's the power of attention.
Well, I think a lot of the problem here is everyone wants to help. Everyone wants to do, help make everyone's worried about the environment and stuff. But I think your documentaries are really good. The How and Why Big Oil Conquered the World, because around here, I live in a little college town. And there's so much propaganda about reducing your carbon footprint and the environmental crisis. And there is an environmental crisis, but it's more about GMO foods and things like this and factory farming. But your documentaries are quite good. These two in particular, telling the story of how the same oligarchs, as you call them, who cause the environmental problems, are the ones pushing the new green movement. Maybe you could kind of sum up those documentaries and the story they tell, because we live in the land of Rockefeller. He's buried in Cleveland. The great granddad.
And isn't there the nice little obelisk on top of his grave?
There is, There is.
I wonder why they have the Egyptian obelisk thing there. Weird. Anyway, it's a crazy story. And so you're exactly right to frame it this way, because I understand that 99.9% of the people who consider themselves environmentalists, are concerned about the environment, really do want to help, are good people who genuinely do have a concern and genuinely do identify that there are problems and they want to do something about it. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that to the extent that you have been steered into the thinking that the only thing that matters, the one thing that we must concentrate all our time, attention, and energy on is carbon dioxide and maybe methane. But to the extent that has become the environmental movement, that has been a deliberate ploy. And it is, I know it sounds insane, that ploy has been introduced and steered and shepherded and railroaded by the very oligarchs, the oil barons, who monopolized the oil industry and made their billions, bajillions from that industry, are the ones now steering the green movement and are trying to make everyone scared of carbon dioxide and limit fossil fuels. What? That can't make any sense. Unfortunately, it does make sense when you start to understand that it was never about oil. It's not about oil itself. It was about the monopolization of a key energy resource in order to give money and power so that those people could use that power as leverage to shape society itself. And where are they going? What's the point of that? Why are they trying to shape society? Not to make more of these ultimately meaningless dollars. Once you have a certain number of zeros in your bank account, adding more zeros doesn't exactly make that much of a difference. Plus, once you start to look at the Federal Reserve and how money is actually created and what it actually means, you realize it really is meaningless. It is just points in a game. So what power? What are they going to do with that power? And shaping society is an important part of that. So there's an entire technocratic agenda for the 21st century, and that's a big fancy word, but essentially technocracy is the idea that we can socially, scientifically engineer society to create a better society. Yes, everyone wants that, and this society will run on energy credits. It won't be money that you use. You will have energy credits that will be given to you by the government or the technate. And how will they decide who gets the energy credits and who doesn't? Well, maybe if you're a good citizen and you line up and take all your medical interventions and you do exactly what the state says whenever the state says to do it, maybe we could have some kind of social credit score and you will get all your energy credits. Again, there's so much information to go through. And again, I'm not just making things up. People can look at the actual sources I talk about and the actual technocracy movement that really did exist in the 1930s and still exists today, but it's essentially been subsumed and made into this part of this green agenda, which is being steered by eugenicists who believe that they are better and deserve to rule over you because they have better genes. It's all insane. I know it all sounds insane until you actually look at their writings, what they openly say and openly talk about, and you start to piece those puzzle pieces together. Because newsflash, the regular TV news is not going to tell you about this overarching agenda and how it all fits together.
Yeah, I thought it was some recent thing, technocracy, when I heard you talking about it. But I read this book that you recommended. It was called Technocracy. I don't remember the name of the author, but it's somebody you interviewed.
Patrick Wood.
But yeah, Patrick Wood, exactly. I knew it was a P. Yeah, it was a very informative. I couldn't believe that in the 1930s, out of was it in California, one of the universities there. It started sort of.
You got me on the spot. I don't think it was
Stanford or something, maybe it wasn't Stanford. But anyways, yeah, it started in the 30s, and it is an insane story. These eugenicists basically. It's it sounds like a futuristic word, but it's like 100 years old.
Yes, exactly right. And for people who want the context of it, back in the 30s. I mean, all sorts of crazy ideas were taking off because in the midst of the Depression, clearly capitalism has failed. Free market. We don't want that anymore. We want to find some way that we can be better, more actively controlled and managed so that this depression never happens again. So there were a lot of people signing up to be communists. There were a lot of people signing up for other crazy ideas, and there was this technocracy movement, and it was a big movement at the time. And they promised, don't worry, guys, there will never be another big depression like this ever again because we are going to perfectly manage society. And the way to do that is we're going to have these big eggheads who are going to sit there with their calculators, and they're going to work out exactly how much energy input we need into the economy in order to manufacture the things we need. And then we're going to take that energy allotment and we're going to partition it out to the people in the form of these energy credits, and we'll get rid of money and all of that. So we'll have this perfectly tuned system. And part of that is kind of actually the exact same craziness I was talking about earlier with the Soviet councils that were deciding exactly how many pairs of pantyhose and how many toothbrushes have to be manufactured. Because, it all has to be centrally coordinated by these eggheads who, don't worry, they have your best interests at heart, and they know exactly what style, shape, and size of toothbrush you need for next winter's ration. And anyway, it was a stupid, crazy, wild, far-fetched idea back in the 1930s because it would have involved literally having some kind of database that could track every single item that was being bought and sold in society so that they could come up with this, energy measure for, how much manufacturing needed to take place. All this crazy, wild-eyed ideas that here we are in 2024, and actually that's pretty doable. Yeah, to have databases of what's being sold in real time, that's pretty trivial at this point. And the idea of coming up with some sort of energy credit, well, again, that might have sounded futuristic at the time, but now we're starting to look at the idea of carbon rationing and carbon credits and, Visa cards that will calculate how much carbon you're spending on each of your purchases and all of this. It's right around the corner now.
Yeah, I'd like to highlight this show you do every week because I think it's really excellent with another guy, James Evan Pilato, New World Next Week. You cover 3 different stories every week that not a lot of people are talking about. And just as you're talking about this, it's making me think of the most recent story you had about Amazon buying these nuclear reactors to power their AI technology and stuff like that. Just crazy stuff that's happening. I used to be someone who prior to 2020, I was into reading about conspiracies, reading books about the Franklin scandal, MK Ultra stuff in the past more. But it was too depressing or too overwhelming for me to kind of keep up on everything going on. But now that it's become omnipresent, they've after COVID, they've all forced us basically to tune in to the spectacle they're presenting. You can't avoid it anymore. So now I am tuned in, and I find your show very, very good. It's just it's kind of, lighthearted too. It's not all serious. You guys have a good dynamic. But it does keep me informed about all these things that are going on. And I think nowadays it is not a good time to have your head in the sand if you want to avoid the traps they're setting out there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's the New World Next Week series. Yeah. And I started that with James Evan Pilato back 15 years ago. We've been doing it 15 years now on basically a weekly basis, if you can imagine that. People can find it at CorbettReport.com. But yeah, we talk about, we try to structure it so that there are 3 stories there, probably one or two of the stories you may have heard of, but hopefully there will be one or two stories you just didn't hear about. And also, we try to structure it that there will hopefully be something positive in there as well, rather than just all doom and gloom. Because, yeah, if you just concentrate on the doom and gloom, that's all you see in the world. That's all you're going to get out of the world. And again, I don't want that to be the message of my work.
Right. You had a recent one about these self-amplifying vaccines that are out now in Japan. That's the latest COVID bioweapon, I guess.
Yes, well, exactly right. Yes. So for people who don't know, there's now not just mRNA vaccines, which, as people know, that hijacks your body cells to start producing proteins that are, manufactured by this modified RNA that people are injecting. Now there's self-amplifying mRNA vaccines, which not only puts in the mRNA, but also puts in these replicase proteins that will start manufacturing more of that modified RNA within your body that will then go on to hijack more of your body cells to produce more of these proteins. So it has the wonderful benefit, according to the people promoting them, that you now need a much smaller dose. Don't worry, guys. We give you a smaller dose of the vaccine when you go in for your jab, because we don't need as much anymore, because it will start producing it within your own body. What could possibly go wrong? Well, if people are interested in what could possibly go wrong, as you say, I just had a report. I had a report, for example, on Japan Rising, which was my attendance at a conference here in Tokyo last month. 2 months ago, where, as you say, in October, the Japanese government approved and has started rolling out this self-amplifying mRNA vaccine. The one and only nation on the planet so far to approve it is Japan. So I guess we're going to start seeing the effects of that in the near future here.
And you had an interesting article that is saying some businesses are banning people now that have the vaccine, kind of like a ironic of twist.
Yeah.
Because people are so afraid of this vaccine shedding, these proteins and stuff.
Well, here's the thing. I am fundamentally for human freedom. So even in the darkest depths of the last few years, I was never against, for example, if a business wants to ban people who haven't been vaccinated, hey, that's their choice. They're a business owner. They can choose to do that. I don't think there should be a government that can force them to open their doors. But in the exact same way, if a business owner wants to step in and say, hey, if you've been vaccinated with the self-amplifying mRNA, I don't want you in my store, I think they're in their right to do that too. And I think it's up to us to make our decisions what kind of business we want to support. Do we want to support the business that is banning us for taking a medical intervention, or the one that will ban us for not taking, or the one that doesn't ask in the first place? It's up to you. And you get to choose which world you want to live in by who you support with your time, your energy, your attention, and your resources.
Right. And you make a lot of good points about the gay cake story or something like that. These things that kind of, I'm against that, but then it's used against you. You have these of course, you shouldn't ban people for making a gay cake, but then it comes back once you want any kind of government intervention, it can be turned against you.
Yep.
Which I think is very good. Now, I wonder, do you ever get spooked or scared about revealing too much information or anything like that? Because I know when I was when COVID first started, I was posting a lot on Facebook. I had a page, and I was losing friends fast. But I had a military guy, in Washington, message me on the Facebook page, and it spooked. And they kind of stopped me from being able to I couldn't log in from my desktop anymore. I could only log in from a phone, just because I was sharing articles every day. And I got a message from a sergeant. It was he had a picture of himself there in in the Marines, anyone available for a chat. And I deleted the whole Facebook and got spooked. Has that ever happened to you? Or have you ever gotten scared covering
you know what?
Kind of stuff?
I haven't had as much cloak and dagger stuff as people might assume. And it's interesting that people always assume that, there must be all sorts of spooks and things happening. And sure, there are times in which, interesting points of conversation where suddenly, the line goes dead or what have you. But I don't tend to blame every single technical difficulty on they, them, those. At any rate, I will say this. When I started, one of the most common comments I would get from friends and family, aren't you afraid that you'll be put on some kind of list talking about this stuff? And I said, no, what I'm afraid of is that people won't talk about this kind of stuff because they're afraid of being put on a list. The fact that there is a list at all and that people seem to know about this, and they don't, that causes them to shut up. That is the problem. That's what I'm concerned about. So I just don't want to live in a society where we have to worry about the list, whatever list that may be.
Right.
And at any rate, if I'm going to be on a list, I want to be at the top of the list. I want to be the person that they, if he goes missing, people will notice. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But having said that, yeah, there was a specific moment that I remember. Let me tell you this story. Back in 2007, I started the website. Pretty soon I started the YouTube channel, which of course has since been censored off of the internet because you can't have truth on YouTube. So, but at the time I remember signing up for YouTube and going, I would never do this normally, but here I am in the internet age and I want to get this information out. So I'm going to use this clearly controlled enemy information platform to get information out to the public, and I'll use it while I can. So I did that to the best of my ability for almost 15 years. Anyway, there was a point at which I was uploading a video that was talking about the World Trade Center 1993 bombing and the FBI informant that was part of that plot. There's this whole story about that, Ahmad Salem, and what really happened there. If people are interested, they can go to corbettreport.com/false-flags, and they can watch my 5.5-hour documentary about the history of Al-Qaeda, where I talk about this. But at the time, I was uploading a video to YouTube about that and talking about that plot. And I was thinking, well, what's the title of this video? Well, I guess WTC 1993 was an FBI job, was the title of the video. And I remember at the time thinking, you know what? This is a moment, because once you start posting this kind of thing, someone's going to see this at some point. You're going to be on some sort of list. This is going to get some attention, right? And so I had to make the mental decision. Do I really want to go through with this? Do I want to put myself out there? Do I want to step through this threshold? And I thought, yeah, I'm not going to censor. I'm not going to censor myself. I'm not going to stop saying what I know to be true and the verifiable facts that I can link people to. I can link people to the New York Times articles and things talking about this. Why can't I talk about it? So I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I pushed the publish button and it went up. And from that point on, it's like anything else. The first time you do it, it is a big moment. It's a hurdle. It's a, do I want to cross this threshold? But once you do it, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it 1,000 times, and then you don't even think about it when you're doing it. And I think it's like any other muscle. You've just got to flex it and realize that you have the power to speak up. You have the power to say what you know to be true. And to the extent that you censor yourself from saying what you know to be true is the exact moment that Big Brother wins. That is the meaning of the end of 1984, when Winston learned to love Big Brother. It's that he suddenly was censoring himself. He enjoyed the act of shutting up and not saying what he knew to be true. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Well, you're setting a good example, because I do think, I remember you do. I mean, when I first started doing it, people knew I was a conspiracy theorist, but during COVID, suddenly it changed, and it's like, oh, you're a bad, you're a QAnoner, you're a right winger. Like, what? All this stuff kind of got lumped in there, and people would send me articles, but if I linked their name, and they're like, "Why? Don't mention me in this, bro. Come on." Yeah. It's like people don't want to have their own name put at risk. But once you do it, I mean, there is something almost rewarding in being canceled or something like that. It kind of motivates you to okay, I must be onto something here if I'm getting this amount of pushback. If I'm actually getting censored or something, then there must be some truth there. So it's really a great example you're setting. For a last question, is there any topics you shy away from because it's just too murky? Like, I noticed there's not a lot about the moon landing on your website, or Paul is dead, or things like that. Are there certain topics you would just avoid just because it's so much speculation?
I don't avoid topics like that. I have talked about them, actually. So if people are interested, I have talked. For example, I had a podcast on Kubrick specifically. I think it was called the Kubrick Question, something like that. It's a podcast back in my archives where I did talk about, and I played a little bit of the mockumentary where they have people revealing, yes, Kubrick filmed the moon landings and what have you, but it's clearly a satire. It's a parody. And it's funny because I play that clip in that podcast episode. I play it as if, hey guys, here's the truth. And then I play a bit of that documentary. And then I come back to say, actually, just kidding. It was totally satire and da-da-da. And it's funny because I get feedback to this day. I get feedback from people who watch the beginning of that podcast episode and they see me play that clip and then they have to write in to say, that's not even true, right? I'm like, well, did you continue listening? Because I said it's not true. Anyway,
right.
Funny stuff. And I've talked about Paul is Dead. I did a podcast on everything I know about conspiracies I learned from the Beatles. So I have addressed that subject and what have you. So it's not that I'm afraid to shy away from certain subjects, but if I wanted to do something in depth on the moon landing, for example, on the moon landing in particular, I'm probably in a different camp than 99% of my audience on that one, because actually I do think that they went to the moon. So in order to
it's not so much. Do you think the footage that they released though is like the actual footage? Because
I'm very much open to the possibility.
Too, but,
I think that footage is altered in various ways. So yes, I agree but I don't think that means they didn't go. But in order to do justice to that subject, I would really have to dig in and really address a lot of the myths and false arguments that get thrown around about that. And honestly, it's not a priority for me. It's like, okay, whatever. You believe what you want about the moon landing. Okay, can we move on with, I don't know, self-amplifying mRNA vaccines or other things?
There's enough stuff going on in the world right now. Yeah, you don't need to dig into the 60s
but
and stuff.
I leave it open. I might do it in the future. Who knows? Here's an interesting topic that I've never covered that I really would, in an ideal world, I'd have time to do. The Shakespeare authorship question. I believe that the Beatles wrote the Beatles music, but I don't believe that Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare's plays. So that's potentially actually really significant.
Multiple authors, or just one guy?
I would lean towards multiple. I don't think it was one person.
I haven't dug into it, but I've heard enough that it does sound like there's something there.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like our time's about up. You got to probably get on to your next interview. You're a busy guy, probably this time of year. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for coming on to Heartbeat in the Brain and talking to us. And I hope that my listeners will check out your work at CorbettReport.com. That's CorbetReport.com.
Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, James. Hope to talk to you again sometime.